get started. Welcome everyone to our second session in our competency-based education series focused on defining CBE at EKU. Our session presenter is going to be Eason, and I will also post some resources to the chat for you as well. Anne?
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here this afternoon, morning. I guess it's still morning-ish, for our second session on competency-based education. This session is going to focus on defining competency-based education and kind of what that looks like for us here at EKU. So last week, my colleague Mary Adams talked about the why and the fundamentals of CBE. And today we're really going to focus on CBE and what that means here at EKU. So our objectives for this session are to define competency-based education, or CBE, as I'll probably be referring to it as, in the context of EKU, differentiate CBE from other course modalities, apply CBE principles to the EKU course design and instructional practice, and identify key elements that distinguish EKU CBE courses from other course modalities here at the university. Okay, and starting off with the question of why. This is something that Mary really highlighted last week in her session. Why are we even considering CBE? And I just also want to take a moment now to highlight the fact that CBE is just another course modality. It is not the answer to every question. It may not even be the best fit for every program. It's just another option. And that's something that we're really going to discuss today. So, why CBE? For a university perspective, CBE isn't new, but the interest is growing because it allows us to appeal to more learners and more types of learners. It allows us to expand our access to different students, but it might not be the best fit for every university. So there are definitely some things to think about from the university perspective when considering these course designs and course redevelopments. Same goes from an instructor's perspective. CBE kind of allows you as an instructor to shift your focus and shift your role in that coursework and in that design work, but it is really needed to be on kind of that bigger program perspective. So that's something that Mary talked about a lot last week was we were really zoomed out and we were in the clouds, and that's kind of where we're going to be staying for a little while, not only in starting these conversations and discussions around CBE, but really in order to create a cohesive and effective program, we want to make sure that we are kind of starting at that zoomed out perspective and thinking about these courses more on that program level. We want to make sure that we're providing students the support that they need and a cohesive learning experience. So as an instructor, a CBE course or a CBE program redesign means that you're really going to be there's going to be more of an emphasis on that meaningful and ongoing feedback for each of your learners. CBE, as we'll talk about in just a minute, really emphasizes the individualized approach to learning. So making sure that you are meeting your learners where they're at, regardless of where that is in the scope of your course, and providing them with the feedback and the supports that they need. It also allows you to connect your students' prior learning and work experience to what they're going to be doing in your course and aligning all of those things to the real world skills that they're going to need when they're in the field, which is, again, why we like to think about this at that zoomed out programmed approach to make sure that we really are allowing students to meet all of the needs and hit on all of the skills that they'll need in their field. And then what about for our learners? One of the most important parts of this equation, CBE courses definitely allow us to appeal to more learners, different types of learners, but it also allows for more flexibility for that learner. CBE kind of targets that working professional or non-traditional learner, and it allows them to use the work experience and knowledge that they already have to help them progress and connect with their coursework. Progress for these learners is based on what they can do and demonstrating mastery, not just total points, total assignments done. It really allows them to take ownership of their learning experience, use what they already know and can do, and work towards mastery. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean, again, that CBE is the best fit, the only fit, the best answer, the only answer, but it does become a part of the conversation. It might not be the best fit for every learner in terms of their working style, in terms of their expectations, but it could be a good fit, which is, again, kind of why we're starting this conversation. Same goes for the program or instructor perspective. It might not make the most sense for your program or for you as an instructor to have this style of course, but it is something that we want to make sure that we're considering for all of those options that we can offer to our students. And CBE is definitely not a replacement for any course that you're currently teaching, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous. We want to make sure that we're thinking about it as another option and not a replacement or the best and or only option. So we talked last week about the different elements and kind of fundamentals of CBE. And one thing that Mary definitely highlighted and something that Dr. Cannell says all the time is that good course design is good course design, regardless of the modality. So a good CBE course is going to have really key elements like intentional course design. CBE kind of takes it to that next level, thinking about the backwards design approach again from the program perspective. It's going to have really strong instructor presence, just like a synchronous or an asynchronous course would, and instructional materials, learning activities, and assessments that really align to the objectives of the course and give students the targeted support that they need. CBE is just a different course modality, so it changes the way that your students progress through the course. It changes the way that your students interact with that material. It might change the way that your students interact with each other or with you as the instructor of that course. It's also going to change the way that you and your program approach designing the course. It's probably going to change the way that you interact with your students in that course, because again, you're making sure that they are working towards mastery and that you are meeting them where they're at. So let's take a look at a general definition of CBE, and then kind of what this means and how it relates to the university. So, competency-based education is a course modality that is centered around demonstrating mastery. So, our goal with CBE education is that our students are mastering a certain skill. These skills are directly tied to the program level objectives or the things that they're going to need to do, the things that they're going to need to demonstrate that they can do when they enter their field. We're not looking at just seat time or total points or total assignments done. We're really rooting everything in mastering those skills, which is great to not only prepare our students to be successful at the next level, but also help them build their confidence and know that they can do these things that they're going to be expected to do in a professional setting. CBE courses allow students to be assessed on their ability. They get constant and ongoing feedback from you as an instructor that helps them improve and work towards that mastery threshold, whatever that is for your program. Course competencies are also articulated, they are clear, and it's clear not only to your students what is expected of them, but also how they're going to meet that mastery threshold. So then for us here at EKU, we have decided to define competency-based education as a student-centered, mastery-focused approach to course design that is driven by clearly defined competencies. These competencies, again, are directly tied to the things that students are going to be doing in their field, whatever that is. Students progress through the course by demonstrating mastery of specific competencies, what they know and can do, rather than just earning points or a set amount of time in the seat. CBE courses are intentionally structured to support self-management, transparent expectations, and consistent evaluation that is aligned directly to professional competencies. So again, just making sure that our programs, because we want to look at this as a program approach, our competencies are aligned to what our students are going to be doing outside of the learning environment, and that they're supported in a cohesive way throughout, from start to finish in that program. That's also probably going to look different program to program. The expectations or the competencies or the level of mastery for a nursing program might look different than aviation. Same goes for education compared to engineering, which is again why thinking about it at that program level, having the clear and consistent competencies, evaluation, and measures is going to help our students to be successful when they're in that professional environment. So let's talk about a couple of key terms that are related to CBE courses. I've used these words a couple of times already. So, course competencies, that is a fundamental piece of competency-based education. It's right in the title. So, a competency is a clearly defined knowledge or skill set that must be demonstrated in authentic contexts. So, it's the skills that our students need when they're in their field of study. Now, these are different from learning objectives, which you're probably very familiar with already. If you are teaching a course, if you've designed a course, those learning objectives are the goals for a course or a module, but they're often a lot more narrow. They're often content or knowledge based, whereas our competencies are skill based. When we're thinking about the course competencies or the program level competencies, they might condense or combine some of your current course learning objectives and outcomes, but they're going to have that skill application piece. We're not totally getting rid of the outcomes or the learning objectives. We're just reworking them or combining them or changing them in some way for those overall overarching competencies. CBE courses have both learning objectives and course competencies, but they're not the same thing. Remember, competencies, they're going to be even more zoomed out and really skill-based, what our students can do. And then mastery. This is another fundamental of CBE education because it's really what defines how students are progressing through the course. CBE courses are rooted in those competencies, what our students can demonstrate, and mastering those competencies, mastering those skills. Mastery might look different program to program. It could look different in your specific program, course to course, as students are refining and sharpening their skills. But we want to make sure that there is a clear and consistent definition of mastery across the competencies for each program. So let's take a look at an example. Last week, Mary did Bike Riding 101, and this week we're going to talk about Microwave Popcorn 101. So this is obviously a totally made up course, but thinking about how this might look if you were going through the course mapping process or figuring out how you might teach it. I have a couple different modules here. They're all tied to my course level objectives. I have different learning materials and activities for each of these modules, and I have assessments for each of these modules. They're all tied to my course level objectives. My students are being supported in the learning activities and materials, and then they're completing some sort of assessment. So from my student perspective, I am working through my assignments, I am completing the work in the modules, I'm getting an assessment, and I'm moving on to the next one. I'm collecting my points. If this was a synchronous course, I might be spending a set amount of time in the classroom environment, and I'm just working through. All students are doing all of the same assignments. They have access to all of the same resources, and they're all doing the same assessments. Pretty typical of any traditional course. So let's look at how this same course, Microwave Popcorn 101, might look in a CBE format. So instead of having my course level objectives, I've condensed those for just one competency. The skill I want my students to be able to have at the end of this course is, or the end of this module, depending how it's set up, is I want them to be able to prepare a bag of microwave popcorn safely and properly. My definition of mastery is that students can turn on the microwave, adjust the power without any assistance, so they're doing this independently, and they're cooking a bag of popcorn where 80% or more of the kernels are cooked perfectly. So we don't want a burnt bag of popcorn. We don't want any unsafe microwave procedures. We're looking for a bag of popcorn that has been prepared safely, independently, and 80% of or more of the kernels are cooked correctly. So I'm going to assess students on this competency by having them submit a video. I've decided that this is an online course, Microwave Popcorn 101. I'm going to have students submit a video of themselves making a bag of microwave popcorn. So I'll be able to see how well they're operating the microwave, see if they're doing it in a safe way, and then when they're pouring that popcorn out into the big bowl, I'll be able to see how many of the popcorn kernels are burnt, if any. So in addition to this assessment, I would have a really authentic rubric that my students would have access to before the assignment would even begin, so they would know, again, exactly how they're being evaluated. And then I also have some assignments and resources here for targeted support. These are similar to what I had on my previous course map for my learning materials and activities, but not all students will need these. They might not all need to know microwave safety. They might not all need a virtual demonstration. So it's just going to depend on what I see from my students in this CBE course. So looking at these two examples, a couple of key differentiating factors for a CBE course, how students progress through that course. So in our traditional course, whether it's Microwave Popcorn 101 or any other course, that's usually driven by the calendar. It's driven by the academic calendar, usually set up in a week-to-week model where students are going through the content that way. In a CBE course, it's just driven by mastery. That's probably going to look different for each of your students, but they must demonstrate mastery, and you'll have a definition of that. You'll have already decided that before the course even begins. They'll have to demonstrate mastery before they can progress on to the next skill. Another differentiating factor is how students are graded. So in a traditional course, they're accumulating points, whether that's through their assignments, assessments, discussions, participation, whatever it is for your course, they're gaining all of those points. In a CBE course, they're graded on mastery. That definition of mastery, whether or not they master that skill, determines their grade or if they can move on. We also have objectives in both courses, but it looks different in the two different styles, the two different modalities. In a traditional course, the content target is usually the objective. It's what my students know in this course, what knowledge they can gain. And in a CBE course, it's their performance, their skills. What skill am I looking for my students to master at the end of this course, or what skill is tied to this competency that I'm assessing? And the last key difference is assessment. Typically, in a traditional course, and this might look different depending on the course, depending on the modality, depending on the assignment, but it's typically some measure of recall. Even in an application-based assignment, we are testing our students' knowledge, the knowledge that they have gained in our course or in our module. Whereas in a CBE course, typically it is a demonstration of competency. We're looking at those overarching competencies, and we want to see how well our students can perform with those. So looking back at our course map, looking at the differences here, let's think about how this might look for two different students in the same CBE style course. So my assessment, like we talked about before, is that I'm going to have students send me a video of them making a bag of microwave popcorn. So I have student A. They have been making microwave popcorn for their entire life. It's their favorite snack. They even worked at a movie theater, so they've operated a larger popcorn maker. They have a lot of experience in this area, a lot of content knowledge, a lot of practice. They submit their video and they have done it perfectly. They're operating the microwave correctly. Their popcorn only has a couple burnt kernels. They've done exactly what I was looking for in my assessment. So they are now able to progress to that next skill. They've shown me that they have mastered that skill and they can progress. Let's take a look at, or let's think about another student in this same course. So, at the same time, in the same course, I have another student. They don't have as much experience making popcorn. They never liked eating it as a kid, never liked watching movies. So, they not a lot of experience or background with microwave popcorn. They submit their video and they haven't done that great of a job. They were not operating the microwave safely. Half the bag was burnt. It wasn't quite what I was looking for in my definition of mastery. So my student doesn't master the skill. That's okay. I can then provide them feedback based on their video, so something that is individualized for them based on what I see. I can give them some targeted support. I have all of these resources already. I see that they really need help with microwave safety, so that's what I'm going to supply them with. I'm going to give them targeted feedback and targeted support to the skills that they or the areas where I see that they need a little bit more help. So I'm going to provide student B with those resources. They are going to engage with that content. They're going to spend some time learning a little bit more about microwave safety. They might practice on their own. They might submit another video to me where they still quite haven't quite mastered it. I'm going to give them some more feedback. I might offer them an opportunity for more support. Maybe I notice in their second attempt, they've mastered microwave safety, but their popcorn is still burnt. So I'm going to give them some more resources on proper cooking time and kind of like some of the cues that they need to look for as their popcorn is cooking. I'm going to allow them to practice a little bit on their own. Maybe I allow them to practice with a peer and then they can submit their assessment again. So it's that ongoing feedback loop, ongoing targeted support to make sure that my student is able to master this skill. Now, I had two students, student A and student B, that are working through the same course and the same content and the same material. They're not working at the same pace. So, my job as the instructor is to make sure that I am in tune with each of those students' needs. In this case, there were only two. There might be more in your course. I need to make sure that I'm in tune with those needs and in providing the support and the feedback that they need so that they both end at the same goal. They're both by the end of this course or by the end of this whatever set amount of time it is for my specific course, they've both mastered the skill. It looked very different. They had two different paths, but they were both able to get the support that they needed to go on to the next level. And this is just one example of cooking microwave popcorn. The progression, the assessments, all of that is probably going to differ depending on your course and your program. But the foundation here that is going to stay the same is that you're providing that individualized support and feedback for your students when they need it and wherever they need it, whether that's in the first week, whether it's in the third week, wherever it is, whenever it is that your students need that additional support or that additional feedback is when you will be providing it to them. So, as you can see with this example, the role of both the instructor and the student really does shift in a CBE course. So, your role shifts, but you're still the instructor, you're still providing students with what they need. You're providing them with the content, you're providing them with the opportunities for support, you're providing them with the feedback. The change is just kind of how that looks and the progression of your students. So you are diagnosing what each student needs, what kind of support they need in order to get to that same end shared goal of mastery. And for our students, it really allows them to take ownership of their learning, which might take some time getting used to, depending on the student and kind of their working style. But they are really in charge of demonstrating that mastery. They have to show that they have mastered the skill. They know what you're looking for. They know what they're going to be asked to do, and they have to show that they have mastered that skill, or they need to take the time to practice that skill, to use the supports that are provided to them to progress and master that skill when they're ready. This might mean that you're providing students with guides or checklists, or additional feedback to help them plan kind of their progress through the course. But again, a lot of that ownership is shifted back to the student because they are in charge of their own learning and their own demonstration of mastery there. So there is some shared responsibility in a CBE course. It's a big mindset shift from the instructor's perspective to just not just, managing deadlines and due dates, but you're really managing their learning experience. You're making sure because they are progressing at a different pace and maybe in a different way, depending on the course and the program, you're making sure that you're providing students what they need. And for students, they have to make the shift of I'm not just completing these tasks that have been set before me, I am demonstrating my ability. So that's going to look different, maybe depending on the student, the course, the program, all of that. But it's really that demonstration of the skills that we're trying to master before moving on. So, zooming back out and thinking about some of the key elements of competency-based education. Remember, it is a mastery-based model. So, students aren't just completing assignments, they're not just completing assessments. They are really showing that they have mastery over a skill that is directly tied to what they're going to be asked to do when they enter the workforce. And keeping this kind of thought process on the program level, we want to make sure that we're introducing our students to these skills and competencies in a cohesive way so that they're supported throughout the entire program. They have an opportunity to practice these skills throughout the entire program, and they can really refine them throughout the entire program, whatever that looks like for the skill base that they are refining throughout their degree. These competencies drive the assessments, it drives the learning material and student progression through the course. And students advance through these courses by demonstrating mastery because they have those clear definitions of what mastery looks like for this competency, for this skill, for this program. It's not just about moving quickly and getting it done. It is not about waiting until the last minute and then submitting all my work. It is about ensuring that you are sharpening the skills that you need to be successful and showing those skills in order to master them before moving forward. Questions. I think I saw a couple of questions in the chat, but are there any other questions that I can answer? Okay, there's one question here. Do you anticipate most grading will be A through F or um, S or U? Okay. I'm going to let Dr. Cannell take the question about grading because he is going to also address that in his session.
No, that's a great point, a great question, Robin, as well. Um, from a transcripted perspective, there will need to be an equivalent of a S or U, A through F. But how you define exceeds mastery, that could be an A. Mastery could be a B, could be a C, depending on how you define it. Same thing with proficient. Um, that's why, Ann talked a lot about, and Mary did too the last time, is that we're talking about the program level, because you're going to want to have those definitions at the program level established before you move into competency-based programming or coursework, because you want that definition of what proficient is in your content area to be the same across those courses. Same thing for mastery, exceeds mastery, etc. And so we recommend at this point is that you kind of define all of that at the program level before you start working on those individual courses. And certainly our team would be happy to help with that as well. Um, because there still needs to be a transcripted grade. How that relates to your coursework is the most is really up to you guys, is up to your programs. But good question.
And something else to kind of piggyback off of that, I guess, is that the mastery threshold and those definitions it could be different, program to program, course to course, which again is why taking that really zoomed out approach is best.
Thank you for answering that. My concern was just around how many scholarships and things like that are connected to grade point averages. And I know that a lot of our adult learners rely on those outside scholarships for funding. And so I think about our social work students sometimes, and I'm sure there's others that last big semester, it's a S or a U, and that sometimes hurts those grade point averages and hurts with scholarship money. So thank you for answering that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even take it a little bit farther in saying an SNU probably is a more appropriate grading scheme. And again, this is all at the program level. There's no black and white here, because either you meet competency or meet standards, meet mastery or not. That's a very binary, of course, discussion. Again, at the program level, that would have to be decided. But no, I agree with you 100%. I think we don't want to reinvent a lot of the back end of where this goes. We're focusing on the content delivery and student facing side of CBE at this point. Um, because the other part of that, and Jennifer was here a minute ago, but I think about accreditation, I think about the Department of Ed, all of those types of um, regulations in true CBE, and I'm going to put true CBE in air quotes because it doesn't really exist. There are no terms, there are no dates. It is when mastery is achieved. But knowing that, we still have to put it into the confines, into the guardrails around traditional education. And at this point, we still have to focus those courses in a set term. So January through May, August through December, that sort of thing. So um, I kind of went off on a little bit of a rabbit trail, but we do want to keep we want to keep those constraints and those parameters intact as we move forward with CBE across the board.
Thank you, Dr. Cano. And I also saw another question about focusing on just a couple learning objectives in the popcorn example. So again, that's also going to depend on the course and the program and what makes the most sense and fits for your course in your program. But the key kind of differentiating factor there is that your course level objectives are not just automatically going to transfer to the course competencies. It's going to be a reworking of those objectives. So it might be condensing some of them to create the skill that you're looking for in that competency, but it's not just moving them from one place to another, it's kind of reworking it. So maybe condensing it, pushing it together, but not just taking from one to another.
Okay,
So
that's good. Yeah, that's good to know.
Okay, yeah. Often it's going to be condensing, maybe reworking some of the language to again shift from that knowledge base to the skill application, but not inventing something new either. Your course, you're still going to have the same goals for the course. It's just going to look different because your students are interacting with that content in a different way, and you are interacting with your students in a different way throughout that course or throughout that program and on that progression. Whoops. Before I move on, any other questions, anything else we can answer for you?
Matthew Howell has a question in the chat as well.
Oh, yes. Competencies revolve around working in teams to produce outputs. Yeah, so that is again kind of looking at that program level. It is 100% possible to have a CBE course that is face-to-face that allows students to work together. It's just going to depend course to course and program to program what makes the most sense for your course and your program. So just because students are face-to-face in the classroom does not mean that their course is inherently synchronous or not CBE. I guess I should say, just because a course is CBE, it is not inherently online. So you could have a CBE style course where students are still demonstrating mastery and they have the option to work together. It could be that students are still working together, but maybe you're evaluating them on one set skill and they're still progressing at different rates, even within that group work. Maybe one student is demonstrating the skill that you're looking for at a faster rate. Maybe they all are working together, which is where the clearly defined competencies and clearly defined definitions of mastery really come into play there. So it's totally possible. That was a lot of words to say. It is totally possible. But again, kind of why we like to look at this on that zoomed out program approach before narrowing it down for each course. Any other questions?
We still have a few populating
Oh,
into the chat. It's been an active chat.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. I've just lost the chat.
Hey, and I'll jump in real quick about
Okay.
the documentation piece here. Really, the documentation's going to be the same between a CBE and a traditional synchronous or asynchronous course. Um, I don't know that there's a particular process or form to either focus on or refrain from. Um, it's more as the subject matter expert, as the faculty of record in that course, do you feel based on the work that the student is doing, do they meet that competency or not? Um, so there's still a traditional assignment, there's still assessments, those types of things. You would keep that documentation really the same way as you would any other course. I'm looking at Ned's question right here. We would strongly discourage a spring A, spring B type model because they're only 7 weeks. Again, CBE doesn't focus on time, but rather the competency based or the knowledge based. Anne made a quote, and it was a quote that I wrote down. We are shifting from faculty focusing on dates and due dates and, well, I grade on Monday because everything is due Sunday, to more engaging with the learning that is occurring throughout the module or time. So uh, scheduling a course in a spring A or a spring B is really the opposite of what CBE is about. We will have to enroll them over the course of a term, again, because of things I talked about a minute ago with accreditation and financial aid and all of those regulatory type things. Um, so if you don't, I guess to point one, if I'm understanding correctly, is you want to offer that spring, fall, summer would be or spring, summer, fall in a traditional 3 times a year. Um, if they complete all competencies in 2 weeks, could they enroll in the next course? That really is a programmatic decision, but I'm thinking about the accreditation financial aid piece. Um, in a true CBE model, yes, absolutely. In practice, until some of the regulatory items catch up, I would probably say no. Could someone complete a whole course in 2 weeks? In theory, yes. Um, the enrollment piece is going to be driven by university policy, accreditation, uh, that regulatory piece. Um, so probably not. Again, based on my knowledge of current practice.
And I think that mindset shift, there is a document in the resources that we shared last week and in this meeting as well, that kind of goes over some of the key mindset shifts that have to take place on in the part of the instructor and the student. Because I think it is just as equally as important for our students to understand this style of course so that they know what to expect, but also how to be successful, because having all of that independence can be great, especially when you are a working professional. But just making sure that they know exactly what the expectations are in terms of how they progress, how they're evaluated, and also what the course is going to look like, because it is different from an online or asynchronous course. So making sure that they are aware of that is really important for their success as well. And making sure that they're not waiting for the last 2 weeks of class to submit all of their assignments too. Any other questions? Is there anything that I have missed?
And Marie in the chat mentions
I'm so sorry. I don't see the chat anymore, so I apologize for missing any questions that I have.
I would think the turnaround for feedback would also play into the timeline in case you can't see it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Which is why it is so important, just like Dr. Cannell said, for instructors to be so tuned in to their students and their courses. And I know that Dr. Manning knows this firsthand herself, because as students are progressing through the course, through the semester, they might be working at different paces, which I'm sure is something that you're familiar with if you are teaching an asynchronous course, but they also are at different levels of mastery. So rather than just working at different paces to complete their assignments and complete the module, if that's the way that your course is set up, they might need more feedback. They might need more practice. They might need more individualized targeted support or resources. So it then becomes the shift of just my students are at different places. I need to grade their work here and here and here and here, to my students are at different levels of mastery. They all need to end up here. This is my end goal. So what do I need to provide my student here? What do I need to provide my student here? And what do I need to provide my student, just to make sure that they all are still reaching that end goal?
I would agree. And I want to add to what Ann said, and I'll go back to that quote about shifting from dates to learning. Um, and I certainly have taught a number of courses, and I kind of fall into this too, is that, I every Monday I grade because I know everything's due on Sunday, or, discussion boards, maybe our initial post is always due on Thursday, as an example. And it's really a big mind shift, mindset shift, because we're moving really away from dates. I think Ned mentioned it above. You could have a student complete an entire course in a week or a couple of days, particularly for those adult learners that have a lot of that prior knowledge and experience, versus someone who maybe has less prior knowledge and experience, and it might take them a month to get through one concept because of them working through that process. So I really encourage faculty to think about that shift, and what does that workflow look like and workload look like. It isn't necessarily more or less of a workload. It is certainly a different workload, and how you process the work of teaching and instructing and grading assessments and those types of things. So really shifting that mindset, from a traditional, I'm going to lecture, I'm going to give an assessment, I'm going to grade those and watch, rinse, repeat. Really the same thing with asynchronous. This really shifts that mindset, um, pretty significantly.
And empowering students to shift their mindset too,
Correct.
because I know a lot of students, and I was definitely one of these students. It's like, what do I do? Where's my task list? Let me just check it off. Or what do I need to do to get an A? And that is not the goal here. The goal is to master the skills that they need to be successful in the field. And that I think is going to be, at least I know speaking for myself as a student, that would have been a hard mindset shift to make. Just focusing on the skills because that is essentially what is going to help them when they are in the field, not just checking off all the boxes. Am I missing any more questions now that my chat has disappeared?
I don't see any other questions, but we certainly would encourage questions if you have thoughts, if you have concerns, if this is certainly a paradigm shift for faculty, and we respect that, we understand that, and we want to support faculty programs. I know Ann mentioned this, and we always want to be positive here, but we also know that CBE isn't for all programs, just like online isn't for all programs. We recognize that too. So if you're considering this for your program, we want to be a resource for you. Reach out to the IDC. We're happy to talk through this, talk through process, talk through ideas. Even if you're still on the fence, we're happy to do that as well. So we want to be a resource for all faculty.
And I will just take a minute to highlight too, when we get back from spring break, I think it's towards the end of March will be our next session, which will be kind of going over the different frameworks, some challenges and pain points when it comes to CBE and developing a course in this style, and just the reality of that program development too. So if you're interested in that, I would definitely encourage you to sign up for session 3, and Dr. Cannell will be leading that one.
Great, thank you. And I've also posted the registration and the information. That session will take place on March 25th, 11:30 to 12:30. The session will be on Zoom. You also have access to the registration link in the chat as well, although we'll send several reminders out. I've linked again to the folder, which contains some contextual information for what CBE looks like at EKU, in addition to some foundational information as well. I can encourage you to bookmark that folder, and we'll refer back to it throughout the series. So with that, thanks so much, Anne, for presenting the session today, and thanks to everyone for attending. We'll also have a video available online that everybody can access and reference as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.